Hi, everyone. Arsalan Arif here with Endpoints News, and thanks for joining us today for Enterprise R&D Technology Adoption Case Study, Genentech. We're sponsored by Benchling, and I'm excited to moderate today's expert panel. Joining us today, we have Lauren Perlman, the head of Enterprise Professional Services at Benchling, and Eric Bierwagen, the director of Discovery Platforms and Model System Informatics at Genentech. If you have any questions during today's webinar, our panelists have reserved some time for questions at the end. So please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as soon as you think of the question. This webinar will be available on demand tomorrow to rewatch or to share it with your colleagues. And now I'm going to pass it off to Lauren to get us started. Lauren?
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Eric. I was hoping we could start by hearing a bit about your role at Genentech.
Okay, well, thank you, Lauren, for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So my role at Genentech, wear a number of different hats, but in the context, I think, in which you're asking, which is relative to ELNs and information management, I'm the lead for our rollout of Benchling here at Genentech. I've been involved with in many different roles within research informatics, and have seen a lot of different parts of research. So I think it's given me a good perspective on just everything that we do, and so very excited about the future.
Nice. So I'm curious, as a starting point for a conversation, why did Genentech start to look away from legacy systems to more of a modern cloud-based system in the first place?
A variety of reasons. I think one of the biggest drivers for us was, I think the nature of research across the board and across the industry has really been changing. It just seems like it's becoming much more collaborative. These different disciplines that previously had been kind of in their own lane. We're just seeing the distinctions between some of these disciplines really kind of dissolving, and so the existing systems that we had just were not going to cut it for us. And I think the industry is feeling the same way, and so we really needed to move to something that would help us be much more collaborative and help us really do the kinds of science that we need to do to bring the kinds of therapeutics that we need to solve, need to bring to market.
It's been really interesting to me how multidisciplinary science has become, and I'm glad to hear there's a shift to that multifaceted approach. What are some of the?
It's very exciting. I mean, from our point of view, I think it's really very exciting to be able to really enable some of these things, or at least have the intent to be able to enable these kinds of trends within science. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I mean, following on that thought, what are some of the benefits that your IT leadership is looking to obtain with that modernization? Obviously, collaboration is a big one.
Yeah, collaboration. I think what most other companies want, they want faster turnaround time. We want to get products to market more rapidly. We need to be able to be more nimble. I think the advances in software products within the past couple of years has been just nothing short of amazing. And I think it's very exciting to be able to take advantage of that and really help drive research forward.
Absolutely. Given that this all is really in the service of the science and the scientists, I'm curious, what role did your scientists play in driving the change and in sort of bringing about this mandate?
I would say that really it came from them. When this whole, our whole rollout started, it was because a scientist had found this new product that really seemed to work very well in their environment, and we're just looking for some help from the IT groups, and so that's how I got involved. And what was really interesting was just seeing the benefit that a modern product could bring to the scientists. And so, you know, we ended up taking a very kind of agile approach. We had a hypothesis. We wanted to test it. And we thought that this product could be very beneficial for a variety of different parts of the company. And we tested that hypothesis. What's interesting about this whole process is that, people were asking me, did we, do a vendor assessment and such? And we didn't really, because I'd been through vendor assessments before. And, just because the kind of little, the examples that you would use to test the product, those weren't necessarily real life. So we really wanted to just try whatever product we were going to be potentially bringing in real life. And so I think that really helped us also.
Okay, so the ability of scientists to touch it, to live it, really made a difference. And it sounds like
use it in their day-to-day work. So
sounds like maybe like a TikTok video, it went viral.
Yes, it did go viral. Yeah, and there was a lot of I think a lot of very positive feeling around it. But we wanted to just make sure that we were doing things appropriately, that we had our hypothesis that this product would be beneficial. We wanted to just test that, and make sure that it was true in a variety of different kinds of contexts that we had within research and dev science.
So one of the hallmarks of the value here is the fact that it's flexible and can address a lot of different use cases.
Yeah, that's very true.
One thing that's really near and dear to my heart, just having been in this industry for a while, is the change management aspect. And while I'm thrilled to hear that people were very into it, I'm curious if you encountered any resistance, and if so, how did you manage that, and how do you generally manage that in these kinds of situations?
Well, what's interesting about the whole the whole rollout that we engaged in was we had utilized change management from the beginning, even from the original outreach with the initial group that contacted us. We engaged a change manager to really help with the whole process. It was, I would say, it was kind of the first time that we had ever done that. I personally come to the conclusion that change management could be very beneficial, because we had tried it with, I'd say limited success, because we had somewhat limited use of it. But this was the first time that we had ever really had kind of a dedicated change manager from the get-go. And I would say that was really powerful, because, change management is many things to many people, but I think the key things that were beneficial in this circumstance was developing a clear message that we would use in all of our communications, developing ways of thinking about potential resistance that there might be, ways of addressing both the kind of the head and the heart. So we're scientists, we think intellectually, but we also always will bring our emotions to the table, whether we recognize it or not. And so addressing both of those kinds of attitudes and ways that people will be coming to it, just someone inexperienced in that discipline was very, very beneficial, because I think it really did help us be much more successful in even in the early stages of the process. But once we kind of got the buy-in and the go-ahead to really begin the rollout in earnest, that certainly the change management was very very powerful, just to come up with a process for getting the groups onboarded, coming up with how can they be supported properly, and ensuring that we didn't just kind of toss the product over the wall. Here, we've trained you, we've followed up, and now we're done, we're going to move on. There was a continuous engagement with all the groups that we had already rolled out to, and making sure that we had targets for adoption, whatever metric that was, just to make sure that we could ensure that, one, we were bringing value to the organization by people using the tool, but also if we weren't, understanding why and how we could address them. So I would say, really change management has been really very, very powerful in I would say the success that we've had in our rollout.
So an ounce of change management is worth a pound of Benchling adoption.
Well, yes, or any products adoption. Yes,
sure.
It actually, a change manager that I was working with said had a good perspective on it. She said that you've spent a lot of money on the product, either developing. Change management is sort of your insurance that you're going to get the value out of it, and I think that's actually a really good way to look at it. That some people perceive it as expensive, and there's truth to that, but I think the value that it brings, at least in our experience, has been far, I would say far outweighs the financial cost, just because we really are bringing value to the organization.
Well, that's an excellent segue, because I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about, or a lot of it, about the value that you're receiving from the transformation so far.
Sure, I would say one of the biggest values, and we, as part of our program, we took a step back and just really came up with some key objectives that we thought we wanted to meet in terms of bringing value to the organization. And I'd say probably the biggest one in my mind was the collaborative capabilities, which I think kind of ties into what I said earlier, which is science is just becoming much, much, much more collaborative. And we wanted to ensure that we were bringing the value that we perceived in the collaboration to the scientists through the use of the tool.
Are you able to speak at all to like how you're measuring that collaboration value? How are you seeing it work in real life?
We haven't established probably the best metric. I mean, a lot of what it is we use hearsay, and we do take some surveys. I think it's more, for us at least, it's helping us understand how we can utilize a tool, how we can configure the tool, and how we can kind of roll it out to people and encourage people to use it, best practices and such, to enable that collaborative value. But I think to your point, we do need to start beginning to measure some of these key objectives that we have to see how we are meeting them, in terms of, are we meeting our goals, or can we bring more value in those particular areas?
Definitely. Looking a little more broadly, can you tell us a bit about Genentech's broader digital transformation vision, and help orient us? Where does Benchling fit into that initiative?
Well, I mean, like most companies, we have aspirations of really digitalizing all of our information. One thing that the new head of GRED has said multiple times, I think in multiple venues, that we are at a tipping point where scale and size of data is becoming an asset to science. And so we really want to leverage that scale and size to help us drive our research and our development forward. So I would say obviously the digitalization fits squarely into that. We don't have a choice. We have to be doing it. I would say a tool like Benchling, where that fits in is, how can we digitalize our lab science? This is the work that's going on the ground. How can we capture that information and leverage that to help our aspirations for driving drug discovery more rapidly and more novel in more novel directions?
And with the addition of Benchling, have you been able to consolidate other systems together? Has it led to efficiency gains?
Well, I mean, one thing that we have been able to do is to take information that was previously scattered over, physical lab notebooks, people's hard drives, different file shares, Google Drive, all different, all different locations, and centralize it into a single place. And that, while seemingly, kind of a small step, it's a huge step, because now we can at least begin to make our information more findable, because people don't have to look in 50 million different places. They can just look in one place and find all of their information. And so, that in and of itself is a huge step forward. I think we see that there's much more possibility, but I think making the data findable, that's the very first letter of FAIR. And so, this is the beginning of our FAIR journey.
Yeah, FAIR is obviously the hot topic of the day in scientific informatics. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the criticality of having FAIR data at Genentech and how your tool suite is enabling that.
Yeah, I mean, the FAIR has become popular, I think, for good reason, because it helps us describe in a memorable way how we want our data, how we need to think about our data, so that we can find it. That's a very good first step. Access it. I think findability, in my mind, findability and accessibility go hand in hand. The real value, and I think it really is a great a great aspiration, is the interoperability and the reusability, because what we really want to be able to do is take our data and get so much more value out of it by being able to use it, reuse it in primary, beyond its primary use, into secondary, tertiary, and tertiary use cases. Right now, particularly in the lab domain, we're just focusing on findability and accessibility, because the labs in our research and development organization, as I suspect most do, cover a wide variety of different use cases and a wide variety of different kind of purposes for the work that's being done. More early stage research, you may just do one or two experiments and recognize that the work, the hypothesis that you had just isn't going to play out, so you move on. Whereas as you move closer and closer to IND filing, the kinds of experiments that you're going to be doing, much more repeatable, much more high throughput. And so, we're stepping into a space that has such a wide variety of different use cases and different settings and different expectations, that we need to just be realistic in terms of what is meaningful across the board, that we can set as a first, kind of the first milestone that we want to reach. And for us, that's the findable and accessible. We can do that with our data. Great. Then we can begin to look at how might we be able to make it more interoperable or reusable. I think we want to be a little more targeted in that circumstance, because it's not going to resonate with all the scientists that we're working with.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty delicate balance hearing you say it that way, because on the one hand, we need the flexibility to address many different use cases. And then on the other hand, we want to have rigor behind how we structure that data, find that data, et cetera. And so there's this interchange going on constantly.
Yeah. And so we just, what we just need to do is first, look at where are we, we're completing our rollout, which we're very excited about, and then figure out kind of the next steps of where do we want to be focusing our efforts next for bringing the maximum value. And, trying to tell, early stage research scientists that we really need to focus on interoperability and reusability may just not be the best way to approach it. And, so I think it is a delicate balance. We really want to figure out how we can bring value, and we're in the process of doing that.
That's great. Recognizing that Genentech's been around a while, and I imagine you have a fairly complex IT ecosystem. Tell us a bit about how you introduce a solution like Benchling into such a system. What sorts of concerns do you have when you do that? How do you address those concerns, and so on?
Yeah, well, I think probably the best way to put it is delicately, just because we got to be we have to be careful that we don't you know, there's a fine line between kind of staying in your own lane, you know, particularly when there may be some external definitions of what the product is meant to do, you know, by other people, and ensuring that we don't, you know, that we work well with and play well with kind of the other systems that we're stepping into. And, you know, I think we've done a good job navigating that. And now what we're really trying to look at is we focus mainly on an unsolved problem within Genentech, and I feel like we've done a good job solving that, of digitalizing lab notebooks across the board. Now we're working on how can we come up with a mode of operation of interoperating with the other systems that we need to. Just because, you know, as you alluded to, we've got a complex landscape that has grown up organically over many, many years. I've been at the company for 18. You know, some of the systems that we have predate me even. So some of these things have very long lives. And you know, I suspect that we are not alone in this circumstance. What we need to do is just figure out how can we come up with a strategy for where Benchling and other tools such as it fit into our landscape. You know, where are the gaps that it's addressing? Where are the real strengths that it has? And how can we augment those strengths with other systems that would address things that maybe, you know, Benchling is not the best solution for. And so, you know, we're really trying to come up with that strategy of how can we have all these pieces fit together, because, you know, we've got one of many tools, and we always will. I don't think there's no such thing as a tool that's going to solve everything for us. So we need to just figure out strategically, how do these things all fit together? How can they communicate together and come up with those modes of communication and interoperability?
Are there any sort of North Stars, so to speak, around efficiency and consolidating software and solutions? Or is it kind of, are you more solution oriented, or is there like an efficiency component to it?
Well, you know, the short answer to that is it really depends on who you talk to. I mean, you know, some groups, particularly groups that are core research, you know, core facilities, I would say efficiency is probably one of the most important things for them. You know, how much throughput can we get through our pathology labs in you know, slide processing, for example? What are some of the other things, you know, that other groups that really are high throughput? How can we increase that efficiency? But it doesn't resonate with everybody. And so, you know, I think we need to just think about where would that resonate, and then what are the other messages that we need to kind of get across for how these tools, how we can position these different tools, and how we can get them to work together to get that message across. You know, I think one thing that is top of mind, I would suspect, for all drug companies is how can we innovate faster? You know, I think that really is probably, and you know, efficiency obviously plays into that, but there's much more to it than just efficiency for the innovation. So, you know, I think we need to just look at how can we figure out what is our North Star. You know, I would say probably enabling innovation is, and how can we position all the different, you know, our complex landscapes so we can move forward and, you know, define a strategy for what it's going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years.
Looking at the landscape today, tell us a bit about the impact of Benchling and more broadly digitalization on your scientists today, and the impact of adoption.
Sure. You know, I would say one thing that was helpful for us was going through the exercise of developing our you know, our key objectives, what we were trying to really strive for in our rollout. You know, we for us, one of the obvious ones was a collaboration. So, you know, I think that is one of the benefits above and beyond just, you know, going from paper notebooks or scattered information to a centralized system. But I think also then, you know, ensuring that we get the message across and things were configured for collaboration, that I think is a huge benefit. You know, there are other obvious benefits, such as, you know, as a reducing the risk of loss of information, for example, because you have the information digitally stored in a central location. I think those are probably the main benefits, but I'm sure we're going to be seeing more. I think, again, what we do need to do then is look, and we're in the process of doing this, is where can we get greater value? One, from the footprint that we have within our organization, because it's been very widely adopted, but also how can we leverage the tool itself, so that it's kind of the goodwill that we built, but also the tool itself, and how we can leverage that to help move us forward.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, in putting any new tool in place, there's human beings involved.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts, generally on the importance of partnership with customer experience and the technical services, and in particular, Benchling's customer experience group. Like, what impact did they have on the rollout and the quality of it?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're engaging in an effort kind of the magnitude that we did, the engagement with the people that you're working with who will be using the tool is absolutely critical. And I will say that across the board, all the people that we have interacted with, both on the vendor side, Benchling side, and also internally, that we have working with the scientists has been very top notch. And that's been so important for ensuring that I think the message comes across that this has a lot of value, and also that people are willing to use it and adopt it. I will say a huge, most of the credit goes to our change management efforts, because I think the folks involved with that, because they're the ones who've been interacting most frequently with the scientists. But I think everybody involved with the effort has been fantastic, and really that's been, I think, very critical for the success that we've had.
I have a couple questions that are more future thinking.
Sure.
I'm curious what benefits, we've talked a lot about collaboration, and how this and other solutions are enabling that. What benefits do you expect to gain as your research and development organizations start using one unified platform and are able to connect those?
Well, I mean, just let's be clear. We're never going to have one unified platform, just because of the nature of the work that we do. But having one platform that is very broadly adopted, I think is maybe the benefit of that I see is that, one, the scientists would have kind of a standard and consistent user experience. Since I don't know about you, but it's always a pain when you have to use like 3 or 4 different tools to do something, either at work or at home or whatever. So minimizing the number of interfaces that they have to use, just for a human, that is very beneficial. I think other benefits that we certainly can see are having many people using a common tool. They can exchange information, and this gets to the collaboration, but I think potentially utilize it for kind of more common workflows too. I mean, the possibilities are endless for something like this, but I think some of the most obvious ones, at least in my mind, are thinking about how can we, since everybody's using the same tool, how can we leverage it to do more with a common interface and a consistent kind of interface and experience.
Looking a little more broadly into the future, what are the next steps for your digital transformation? And what do you expect the role of Benchling to be in that space?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we want to be able to get to the second part of FAIR, which is the interoperability and reusability. In order to do that, you need to either have a common language that you're speaking. Obviously, when I say, assay X and you say assay Y, are those the same or are they different? And how can we just tie that information together? So I mean, that's obviously one part of it. So how can we embed some of that within all of the tools that we use, so that information that is gathered within one can easily flow into the other, and be interpretable and meaningful in another context. And I will say that that will take work, both on the technical side, and this has been done. It's not that this is not a solved problem, but it's just, we need to get our tools in place, and positioned in such a way that we can utilize these common ontologies and language. Mm-hmm. But I think also there's going to need to be work done so that people can recognize, who are using these tools, that they need to use them in an appropriate, in a way that will enable these kinds of this kind of interoperability of information and such. So, I see that's kind of one of the big things in the future, is just how can we get the technical underpinnings to be able to do this, but also how can we, again, how can we enable the change management so that people see the value of doing the right thing, as it were.
Yeah. It's so important to configure the system, make it easy,
yes.
But then also train people so they know how to engage properly.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said a magic word with ontology, but I don't think we have time to dive into that today. That's a voyage all on its own.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I have one last closing question, and this is your hard-fought experience based.
Sure.
What is one actionable piece of advice you have for people in our audience who are considering their own digital transformation? How do they get started? What should they be thinking about?
It's a good question. I guess the one piece of advice that I would give is really look at, what are you trying to accomplish with your digital transformation? And be very clear and very specific in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Because if it's just, well, this is what we think we need to do, one, it's not terribly motivating, quite honestly. But also, how can you know when you've met that? And three, it just doesn't really resonate. So, we had set some specific goals for ourselves in this digitalization, that we wanted people to be able to collaborate more easily. We wanted people to reduce loss of information, for example. And so just really being very honest with yourself in terms of what you want to accomplish, and setting clear goals for yourself. I think that has been, for us, very helpful in terms of ensuring that we, by our measure at least, we've been successful.
Mm-hmm. So begin with the end in mind.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. Well, Eric, thank you so much for an awesome conversation. A lot of nuggets to think about there. And I think we'll jump to our Q&A now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, fantastic discussion over there. We're going to move right to our Q&A session. Right now, I've got several questions from the audience. Please keep coming. We've got a little bit of time reserved here for questions, and I've got a couple myself over here. First of all, I want to ask about the role of culture in transformation. And specifically, what kind of culture do you need in place to make this transformation successful?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Arslan. And I've been kind of thinking about that, reflecting back on how our rollout has gone. I think I think one of the things that's important is curiosity and openness. I mean, if people are not really ready for a change, change management will help. But if people are going to be very resistant to change, then I think you're going to have a real challenge in terms of the adoption and the acceptance of what you're trying to do. I think the other thing too, in terms of the culture, is that recognizing what motivates people, so that you can kind of play to that, so that you can ensure that the message that you have resonates with them. If this is, if their fears are this and their hopes are this, that you address those fears and you play to the hopes in terms of the messaging that you have. So, I think we've been lucky that I think for us, the culture has been certainly very, very open. I mean, we certainly there was fear, uncertainty, and doubt. No doubt about it. This was a new tool, and people didn't know much about it, and so the standard response is kind of go, oh no, this may have a lot of challenges, but I think we were able to overcome those.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. Here's a really interesting question that's come in from the audience over here. Building on your answer over there, can you expand a little bit on the importance of training in supporting this rollout? And what was your approach? And specifically, how did you measure success?
Yeah, I mean, training is absolutely critical for the success of a rollout of this magnitude. How we approach training? Well, I mean, I think quite frankly, we were. I think maybe the best description was we were agile. We started with an initial training, and that was general, and we certainly modified it as time went on, as we had more experience, understanding kind of for people what where were the challenges in terms of understanding the tool and how to use it, and also where were the things that were obvious in terms of making sure that people could understand. And then also looking at how much time could people spend versus how much time they wanted to, and kind of meeting their needs. So we certainly evolved our training. I think originally we started with a very standard, 1 or 1.5 hour, and then really began to modify and adapt our training as time went on for ensuring that people got what they needed and got it in kind of a time frame that worked for them, and also having follow-ups, because this is if we want this tool to be used appropriately and as well as possible. I don't know about you, but I don't remember everything that I learned in a training, and so having follow-ups, having refreshers, and reaching out to people, weeks after, just to make sure that and offering opportunities for people to have skill ups or refreshers, that also became very, very powerful. And then the measurement, which again also helped in this whole adventure, I would say, was just understanding, getting feedback from people in terms of how effective was this, how did this help you? How could we make it better? And I think that was really the measure of success. The feedback that we got after the trainings, and the retrospectives that we did after a department was fully trained and kind of launched with the tool. Just really understanding that and incorporating that into our whole training process. So.
Another follow-up question here. Are you able to share any details on just how big your user base is and how many support people you need to support that user base, Eric?
I mean, I can't give you exact numbers. It's broadly adopted in our research and development sciences organization. In terms of the number of support people, again, I can't give you numbers. It's actually been lower. I mean, probably the best thing that I can say is it's actually been lower than we had maybe originally expected. But we do. I think the key message that I would give is that it is important to have support readily available, because you want to be able to ensure that the scientists who are using the tool feel that and get the needed support so that they aren't stuck. I mean, that's really the most important, because the tool is there to help them. And so if they're stuck in using the tool, or if it's unclear how to use it, that we address that as quickly as possible.
And so can you, I guess, building on that line of questioning, has Genentech gone through a similar implementation before?
I mean, we've gone through many implementations, and there's there are many tools, IT tools or such. I'm trying to figure out how to answer this question, which is maybe the key lesson learned from my point of view is that really look at what are you trying to accomplish with the introduction of a tool, and ensure that you really make sure you're hitting those goals or that purpose. So, if your purpose is to, enable a certain thing, well, make sure that people actually are able to do that, and such. So, I think that's probably the more important thing. And then also thinking, kind of starting with the end, this is what we want to enable. How do you make sure that you enable that? So, what trainings are necessary, what kinds of messaging you need to have, and really think through that.
Okay. Another great question from the audience who's just come in. Can you give a sense of the timeline for this project from idea to implementation?
Yeah, well, because it started really with just a single group and almost a single person who had discovered it and then went to the broad implementation that we have, we approached that very agilely in the sense of we had a hypothesis that this tool would be appropriate, but we weren't quite sure. So we wanted to measure that. So in kind of the whole process, we wanted to make sure that we were going to be bringing value. And then looking at the kind of from the beginning to the end, it ended up being over 2 years. But that was really because we wanted to make sure that the tool was bringing value, that we constantly were making sure that people were using it as we would have expected. And if there were any deviations from that expectation or the value that we were anticipating bringing, we could, take time to address those issues that we had discovered and, use those moving forward. So, we didn't want to rush it, but we wanted to do it in a way that was going to be as successful as possible.
Okay. Lauren, let me get a couple questions over your way here. A question from the audience: if you have a GXP instance, how easy was it to validate for automated lab work, documentation, results reporting, and report generation?
So we have a validated cloud instance of Benchling where we put all GXP related customers in work, and comes with a standard IQ OQ validation package, and we work with our customers to do the PQ portion of it. So relatively straightforward, compliant according to all standards, and we work with our customers to address any customer specific needs and tackle those as they come up.
Okay. And another question here from the audience: would you please comment on the ease of migrating legacy data into Benchling, as well as the ease of searchability and retrievability of historical data?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, and it really depends on the nature of your historical data. The simplest approach would be something like attaching PDFs and using notebook meta information to provide system-wide searchability. So searchability is very straightforward. If you want to pull specific data out, it really depends on the structure of that data. And we have a number of mechanisms for importing, depending on whether it's inventory, results data, like registration type data, et cetera. And so we very routinely work with customers to do that sort of legacy data import.
Okay. Eric, I'd just like to ask you in general here. So has your transition, this digital transformation, has it allowed for better data mining, a better use of machine learning techniques? Are you understanding better large data sets?
I mean, in general, yes, we're moving, the large organization, yes. Taking a more narrow view for our specific implementation, we're taking a stepwise approach. For us, where we started, which was our lab data was scattered over many different systems and many different locations, is probably the best way to put it. We had data in paper notebooks, we had data in some systems, we had data on some file shares, we had data on people's individual computers, and in other cases, we had data stored in very inappropriate places, which I won't mention. But the first step that we think is in some respects the most important is to get that data centralized into a single system. And so, and the virtue and the benefit of that is that at least you can then begin to have a hope of finding it much more easily than if because you can't very easily find things in paper notebooks. If you don't even know where it is, you just can't find it. So, I look at this as a journey where the very first step is centralizing on a specific platform where we know that we can begin to find that, and then looking where appropriate. And I stress this because we have an implementation that goes from very, very basic early stage research all the way through pre-IND filings and the data capture for experiments that support that. So, machine learning and data mining on very early stage research, where you may just be doing a single experiment to see whether something is appropriate or not for pursuit, I'm not sure it makes sense. So I think, for us, the next step is now looking at where does it make sense to focus our energies with the kind of data that would support machine learning and data mining, and then begin to look at how we can make that data more mineable, how we can make that data more readily understood by machine learning algorithms, which really then gets into how can we standardize and structure the data more appropriately. So, and that's where we are now, is now looking at where do we need to focus our efforts on kind of vocabulary ontology standardization, data structuring, and then beginning that change management process effectively so that we can realize those kind of benefits.
And yeah, I was just wanting to ask you about how your data infrastructure has evolved over the last few years, and really the next steps that you were looking to really improve your data infrastructure. So essentially, could you just comment on a little bit, literally, what are the concrete sort of next steps in your view to improving your data infrastructure?
Again, I think for us, it's really identifying where do we need to focus our efforts, because we can't do everything right at once, and so where are those opportunities for us where the data, if we were to have it managed in a way and structured in a way and organized in such a way that we could compute on it and, for example, combine internal experiments with external data so that we could even realize greater power of the scale of the data, that's where we're going to be focusing our energies. So, we've begun that, and in the context of the lab data, we're now beginning to identify what are some of the most important lab processes and lab data that we need to focus on for really making sure that that data is computable effectively.
Okay. Great. Lauren, I got a quick question for you from the audience. This has to just do with Benchling and workability with other LIMS. So have you begun interfacing Benchling with other labs' LIM systems like Watson or Labware? How easy is the interface, and is there ease in data transfer?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have integrated with a number of systems, and that is achieved through what's called our developers platform, development platform rather, which includes both API endpoints to access the various data components in Benchling as well as event triggers. So automating some of the data transfer to occur upon certain events. And so we certainly evaluate that often with a wide variety of customers as needed.
Very good. We just have a little short time left for our webinars. Just a couple of questions I do want to make sure to get to. Eric, really, what are the most important lessons that other companies can learn and pull from your adoption?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most important is that change management does have a huge positive impact on the value that you can realize from implementing a software solution. I think another one that I really do want to stress is that we took a very kind of agile approach in the rollout. We weren't quite, when we started, we had no idea, was this something that we wanted to go broadly across the organization and end up where we are now? We just didn't really have an idea. And we weren't even looking necessarily to solve that problem, but we took the opportunity that was presented to us and then developed hypotheses that we wanted to test along the way. Could this work in early stage research? Could this work in late stage research, early development? What are the kinds of things where it wouldn't be appropriate? Where would it be most appropriate? And we're testing those out so that we could develop the appropriate way of thinking about what was the value that this tool or any tool could bring, and how should we really think about it? And so, one of the things that people have asked me in the past is, did we do a competitive analysis, landscape analysis? And quite honestly, we did not, because I've been through that and seen the results of that. And, a lot of times the use of the tool in the examples that you have doesn't match the real world. And so we really wanted to develop our hypotheses and test them with real world examples, people using this in their day-to-day life. And I think that approach of having hypotheses, testing these, making sure this worked for people in the lab, in their environment, so they're going to be using it, and testing it for, a while, not just a week, but, months, to make sure. I think that really helped us develop the confidence and the ability to really have a successful rollout of this tool.
That's a really helpful tidbit. I also want to ask you any strategies or tips you actually have on working and integrating and processing the large data that you do have.
I mean, above and beyond the obvious, the most obvious to me is making sure that your data matches. I mean, your data is clean and all that. I will confess I'm not as involved with some of those efforts. Really, where my team has been focusing on is thinking about, okay, when people enter data, how do they enter data, and how can we ensure that they are entering the data in a way that is structured appropriately, is described properly, so that we can make greater use of it. And that's an always evolving process, just because the science is ever changing, the needs of the organization are ever changing. But just how can we kind of get ahead and make sure that the data is entered as well as possible, rather than allowing people to just kind of enter either unstructured or inappropriate data, or data that maybe is not as well described as it could be, and then having to clean things up later at a later date. That just, obviously that is not as a great a strategy. So we've really been focusing on, in order to enable the data so that it can be used in larger, in greater ways and in larger data sets, we really focus on making sure that people enter the data as well as possible from the beginning.
All right, well, Eric Bierwagen, Lauren Perlman, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with the Endpoints audience today. Thank you everyone in the audience for tuning in, and we appreciate Benchling for sponsoring today's discussion at Endpoints webinars. If you'd like to rewatch the webinar or share it with colleagues, a link for on-demand viewing will be sent tomorrow. I'm Arsalan Arif for Endpoints News. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thanks, everyone.